I welcome you scholars to the last lecture pertaining to classical criticism. This is the 8th lecture. I am sure you must have understood so far Plato, Aristotle and Horace's opinions about criticism. Today we are going to discuss Longinus as part of our Greco-Roman studies. Longinus was discovered in 1554 by Robertello. He is the one who had introduced him to the modern readers, and Longinus wrote, the purpose of the writing of Longinus was to correct the faults of Caecilius, who belonged to 1st century AD. The treatise talks about the causes of decline of oratory and rhetoric. We know that vulgarity had started creeping in, and common man is slave to passion, and we are more attracted towards bad things than the good ones. Similarly, oratory and rhetoric had also gone down, the standards had gone down. So Longinus thought of talking about these issues and elevating these things to a decent level. He talks on the sublime. It is the most precious legacy of the Greco-Roman period. Large portions of the text, however, are missing. There are frequent gaps and form is imperfect. That's the case with most of the literary texts from the Greco-Roman world. So the treatise is addressed to one Terentianus. There is a person Terentianus, so Longinus addresses him. It is a discussion on the voices of style in the contemporary oratory. We talked about it, that it was a degenerative phase in literary history. He observed certain faults, and those certain faults, he wanted to correct those certain faults, and the faults are termed as a false sublime. We'll discuss sublime also. Sublime relates to grandeur and loftiness. So there was no loftiness, there was no grandeur, nothing of that sort. It could not, in fact, rhetoric and art and philosophy, it catered to degraded tastes and the passionate man. It had moved out of the domain of the intellectuals to the people who had no appreciation for these intellectual domains. There are 5 main sources of the sublime. There is grandeur of conception. You need to have a grand idea. That is why we always, whenever we pray, we always talk about God giving us great ideas. That's what Plato talks in his Republic, that idea is the first degree reality, because the idea is given to us straight away by God. So great ideas come from God. Whatever we see in the world is a copy of idea, and that's why whenever we pray, our focus is on ideas. We pray to God to give us great ideas. That's what Gita also talks about. It says, idea is most important. Thoughts are more important, and if you have better thoughts, then the outcome of those thoughts is going to be much better. It is going to give much better results. So to every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. This is what the modern science says. So similarly, Longinus also talks about the grandeur of conception, that our writer needs to have great ideas. Then there is intensity of emotion. One has to be a natural genius as far as intensity of emotion is concerned. A writer has to have inborn genius. Then appropriate use of figures. We have nobility of diction. Then there is dignity and elevation of word order. The central theme is treated on comprehensive line, embodying an approach to the subject from both the psychological and the technical points of view, while something of the useful rhetorical procedure is also adopted in treating first of the subject matter and its arrangement under the head grandeur of conception, and then the choice and argument of words in subsequent sections. That's what Atkins has to say about it. He further says, and by means of an abundance of illustrative quotations, by his shrewd and convincing analysis of literary qualities, the author succeeds in calling attention to some of the fundamental principles underlying all good writing, while commanding them to his readers by the freshness and charm of his style. Now, on the sublime, the introductory is that the work is addressed to Terentian. He was a friend of Longinus, and the purpose is to correct the faults of one Caecilius' essay on the sublime. Caecilius had written an essay on the sublime, and Longinus comes across it. Then he finds faults with it, and he addresses those faults to Terentian. He discusses it with Terentian. Now, what is sublimity? Let's discuss in detail. Let's understand sublimity in detail. It is a certain loftiness and excellence in language. It is this quality which makes poets and writers great and immortal. Now, this loftiness and excellence in language is one thing which makes poets immortal. Sublimity does not merely persuade, it carries the reader irresistibly. And we know how it carries the reader. Aristotle has also talked about it in detail. Plato has also talked about it, that in real life, wherein we are taught to bear our misfortunes courageously, the poet with his poetic art arouses some emotive feelings in us, and we are carried away irresistibly. And this can also be seen in Coleridge's poem, The Rime of Ancient Mariner. We know Coleridge is telling a lie because his purpose was deliberately, he creates that willing suspension of disbelief in the reader, yet the reader cannot escape him, he keeps listening to him. So sublimity does not merely pursue, it carries the reader irresistibly. When we are talking about this poem, Rime of Ancient Mariner, with which most of you are acquainted, we notice that the reader is carried away. Not only that, the person in the poem, the character in the poem who's listening to the bearded old man cannot move from that place. The wedding is over, but still the old man holds him with his grey beard. So, another question that arises is art capable of teaching sublimity in writing? A very important question. Now, can art teach it? There are different approaches. There's heredity and the environment. Many people in the educational domain, they attribute 80% to the environment in upbringing of a human being, and 20%, it is his genetic material that decides his personality or performance or trait and things like that. There is another school which says leaders are born, they cannot be made. So this is a vital question. Let's see what is his take on it. Now there are counter views about it. One school says that our loft tone is inborn and it doesn't come by teaching. Nature is the only master that can teach it. It is the same nature which Plato is talking, which Plato terms as aptitude in his Republic. The other school says that nature needs the help of art to have control over impulses. Nature. Now somebody may be an excellent swimmer, that doesn't mean he jumps into a river which is flowing very fast and he fails to come out. There have been many chances people drown themselves. So with that example you can understand it, that even though you might have the aptitude, but yes, there's the need of the art. Art helps to improve that nature. It prunes that aptitude which is there within the human being given by God. So it is only by art that a writer can learn when to abandon himself to the direction of genius. Art is to nature what counsel is to good fortune. The expression of the sublime often needs the spur, but it also needs the curve which is put by art alone. There's a spark of sublime, but sometimes, as Plato says, one is carried by that madness. So it is art that keeps that madness in check and control. Then he talks about the causes of a faulty style. The faulty style is caused by timidity, bombast, puerility, grandiloquence, and frigidity. So these are the things that lead to false sublime. True sublime, now let's see what is true sublime. It lifts the soul and carries and arises when lofty ideas are clothed in lofty language. So grandeur of conception has to be there, that is lofty ideas. Then they need to be clothed in lofty language. If you have ideas and you fail to express, that means it becomes meaningless, it becomes useless. So lofty ideas need to be clothed in lofty language. It gives us joy and uplift our spirits. The more we read it, the more we enjoy it. It arouses new feelings every time we read it. It pleases all and pleases always. So great language by great writers, embodying great ideas, they please all and they please us always. Now, false sublime consists of a gorgeous exterior. You may correlate it with a spurious product which comes in a better packing than a genuine one, and it attracts us, we move towards it, and then the results. And therefore, gorgeous exterior, and therefore tries to hide emptiness, and all this is done to hide emptiness. Affected and pompous language is used to hide trivial thoughts. Petty ideas are hidden with pompous language. Again, you can think about Pope's Rape of the Lock, wherein the petty ideas have been clothed in a brilliant language, in a brilliant style. Now, what are the sources of the sublime? Grandeur of thought, that's the power of conceiving great ideas. Strong and inspired passion and its treatment. The poet has to be passionate and he needs to treat it well. Then there's use of figures of speech and language. Appropriate figures of speech and appropriate language needs to be used. There's noble diction, proper choice, arrangement of words, handling metaphor and ornaments of diction, dignified, elaborate and elevated composition, that is rhythm. The first two are the gifts of nature, while others are acquired through art. It's neither art alone nor the aptitude, nature alone. It is the mixture of that aptitude or nature and the art that a great composition comes up, a great writer needs to have. Grandeur of thought, only great minds can produce great literature ideas. Truly eloquent should be free from low and ignoble thoughts. Mean minds and survival ideas cannot attain sublimity. That's why the focus is on idea, on wisdom. Like it's said in Gita, that the souls with whom I am happy, I give them nothing but wisdom. And that's why we pray. In the Western philosophy also, we find Plato talking about idea as the ultimate reality. Because idea is a part of God, we receive it from God, it comes from nowhere. So idea, so ignoble thoughts, low and ignoble thoughts can never create sublime. So great minds can produce great literatures, and they have to be free from low and ignoble thoughts, like people at the seat of authority. If they have ignoble thoughts, system becomes paralyzed. You can see how it is happening in the public domain. You go to a public office, you know it pretty well, how troublesome experiences are. That's only because of ignoble thoughts. So even when we talk about education, our focus should be more on character building. We need to serve, and this is one of the major Christian elements as well, that we need to serve people, service to humanity. So this is across. VI also talk about serving the masses. But such ideas, such loftiness doesn't come with low and ignoble thoughts. Thoughts need to be really high. Mean minds and survival ideas cannot attain sublimity. The words are full of sublimity, whose thoughts are full of majesty, selection and organization of material, systematic selection of important elements like events, emotions and passions, and their unification into a single whole. Again, we are talking about a single whole, that organic unity about which Aristotle has already talked about. Then amplification. Sublimity evolves out of elevation, while amplification is related to a multitude of details, that's prolixity. Imitation and sublimity. Imitation of great writers of antiquity leads to sublimity. The ancient writers are full of excellence. Again, we find, that Longinus is relying on the Greeks. A writer should ask himself 3 questions, very important questions that, literature might not have any value, but let me tell you, it is a great social science. Just analyze yourself with the questions being raised here. How would Homer or Plato have expressed a particular idea? That's how we need to think. Whenever some great person is doing a great deed, then we need to analyze and understand, like a writer understands from Plato or Homer. So we also need in practical life to understand from great men, how can we improve a system, how can we improve our efficiency. The way Longinus is talking about improving the performance in the domain of art, we too need to ask ourselves these questions. If Homer and Plato had to listen to his composition, now if we talk about our actions, so then what would be their reaction? So this objective element, these questions, they are talking about objectivity, they are talking about broader arena. In short, they are talking about the entire civilization in the context of, though it is in the context of perfection of art, but these questions, they relate to every other field as well. Then how would future ages judge his composition? Like similarly, we are taught, that how, if I act in this way, how are the people going to react? What difference am I going to make to the life of the people or the coming generation? So similarly, a poet has to think what future judges would think about this particular, what future judges would think about this text. So these are major questions. They are relevant everywhere. Use of figures. The writer should imaginatively see what he is describing and then try to produce a similar reaction in his readers. Poetical images are meant to astound the readers. Rhetorical images should be meant for vividness and clarity. Final aim of the poet should be to stir passions and emotions. Herein we notice that he is not ignoring Plato at this point. Figures of speech contribute to sublimity provided these are employed at the right place, on right occasions, right manner and right motive. Artificiality of figures rouses suspicion and anger. Art lies in concealing art. So an artist has to be perfect, it should be in. Then let's see what are the observations of Atkins on this. To Longinus, the operation is not that aims at capturing something of the ancient spirit, something of that vital creative force which had gone to the making of the earlier masterpieces, and its effects it describes as that of illumination. That illumination is again the spark, we find ancient poets seeking inspiration from the muses, which Plato has condemned, but we find even Pope in his mock epic Rape of the Lock, he talks about illumination, he addresses the muse in a Homeric manner, guiding the mind in some way, mysterious way to the lofty standards of the ideal. Here then it's something new in the critical outlook, a recognition of that imaginative stimulus derived from great creative genius, as well as an interpretation of imitation that raised it to a higher place. And it is such theorizing as this that constitutes the greatness of Longinus. So we cannot deny Longinus' importance. Then various figures and their uses. Adjuration or apostrophe, it is the effective use of an appeal to stir emotions. Rhetorical use of question and answer method makes the language impressive and effective. Such a device gives energy to words. Questions, however, should spring naturally from an outburst of passion, should strike as being natural amid given circumstances. Ascendaton, it is a device to remove particles. It is best suited to express rush and passionate moods. Then union of certain figures, figures such as anaphora, repetition of words, and diatipsosis, that is vivid description, can be used together for a heightened effect. It imparts vigor, cogency and beauty to a speech. Then we have hyperbation. Hyperbation consists of inversion of words and thoughts. It describes best the violent and agitated states. When a person is laid with a strong passion, it leads to a reversal as he jumps from one state to another. This gives a touch of reality to speech. Art is perfect when it seems to be nature, and nature hits the mark when she contains art hidden within her. So the very important line, you must remember it. Then polypota, it consists of the interchange of one tense with the other, one person for another and one tense for another. It is an excellent tool for public oratory and adds to sublimity. It leads to diversification and enlivens exposition. However, it should be only used when the nature of subject allows it. To overlay every sentence with ornament is very pedantic, and we should not get into excesses. Periphrasis, indirect and circumlocutory speech, it should be carefully used, else it might lead to a disgusting situation. Striking words are not essential for sublimity. Beautiful are the very light of lofty thought. Inappropriate diction should be avoided. Use of metaphors, appropriate use in impassioned and descriptive passages. The proper time for using metaphors is when the passions roll like a torrent and sweep a multitude of them down their resistless flood. No fixed rules, but the poet can use as per the demand of the situation. Same is the case with similes. Now digressions, hyperboles and arrangement of words. Genius with faults is better than a mediocre. Digression is an integral part of the writing of a great writer. We've talked about epics, you understand what is a digression. Hyperboles may be used in great as well as mediocre writings. Those hyperboles are best which go unnoticed or are concealed. However, these must not overstep. Again, there has to be a balance, and the hyperboles which go unnoticed are the best. Harmonious arrangement of words is an integral part of creating sublime. It reaches our souls. A sentence should be an organic whole. Haphazard writing of language is hazardous to taste. Excessive consciousness of expression also lends to mar the sublime. Deformity instead of grandeur ensues from over-compression. Use of mean words, low and dignified language should be avoided. Decline of eloquence during Greco-Roman period. We've noticed this fact. Longinus therefore emphasizes on literature, on great literature springs from great and lofty souls and not from those with whom the world is too much. These are the suggested readings. I hope you might have understood about Longinus, his theory, how he is influenced by the Greeks, and the points where he deviates. If there are any questions pertaining to this, I would request you to mail me your queries, which I would be really glad to answer. Thank you very much.